Evening, citizens. I was going to talk about have a little story about just a little anecdote about um, what happened when I went to the demonstration on Saturday, and it was just a little story, and it's I was hoping for it to be somewhat upbeat, and after my last video, uh, many of you were very generous about my contribution, so I thought I'd try and come up with something, something a bit more positive. And I will get to that in a bit, but um, just sitting here this evening, it's just I've just seen the internet on fire over the revelations that the alleged killer of the three girls in Southport has been charged for terrorism related um, activities, shall we say, and inspired by the Muslim terrorist group Al Qaeda, which of course was the rumour that started flying around in the aftermath of the killings, and for which many people, maybe even hundreds of people, have now been jailed for that supposed piece of misinformation, which now, of course, turns out it seems to have been true all along. These are only the first reports I've heard about it. So, as obviously to be cautious about this, I don't know that this is true, but judging by what I've read, it does seem to be true. But because of jumping the gun 3 months ago, or 2 months ago, what it was, wherever it was, could land you with a lengthy jail sentence. I will put that caveat in. Having said that, assuming these reports are true, this almost certainly I would have thought would have made many of the convictions, such as they were, unsafe. I would have thought. I'm not a legal person myself, so I'd have to defer to others. But that sounds as if that is might be a challenging of those convictions might be a likely outcome, and with a much improved chance of success. It won't help Peter Lynch, obviously, and the tragedy of that remains. But of course, this should lead to heads rolling, resignations, um, uh, the writing of miscarriages of justice, all this sort of stuff. It should lead to all those things, but almost certainly will not. And this is what is so dispiriting about so much of this stuff. I was talking with my work colleague today, and once again he is railing against the injustice of so much of this. And what with the jailing of Tommy Robinson, and the the obvious tier system that we've got going here. But from what I understand of the jailing of Tommy Robinson, and because of contempt of court, it sounds as if the supposed reason that he was jailed was, from the court's point of view, that his actions undermine, I can't remember the exact wording, undermine the effectiveness of the legal system, or at least undermine people's faith in it. And I mean, that's a very roundabout way of saying people have lost faith in the law, and we don't like it when people lose faith in the law, because the law has to be obeyed from their point of view. And many people have lost faith in the legal system, and they want to stop that from being most people losing faith in it, because we're a pretty disgruntled bunch on this side of the aisle, and we are discriminated against, quite obviously, and we're threatened, and threatened with all sorts of things, and that threat has been delivered by the bucket load, particularly in the case of Peter Lynch. So it's becoming increasingly clear, and I've known this for some time, but I think it is becoming clear to other people, to a much wider audience, that the state goes after people if people attack the state. The state doesn't really go after people if they just commit crimes, if they kill people or rape people or rob people or injure people or maim people or rob people or ruin people, because the state is not interested in that. The reason they don't go after they were very reluctant to go after the perpetrators of the grooming gangs was because they couldn't be bothered, because the grooming gangs weren't challenging the state. Tommy Robinson is challenging the state. The reason they didn't go after the Black Lives Matter rioters was because Black Lives Matter weren't challenging the state. The state agreed with Black Lives Matter. But when people challenged lockdowns, that was open revolt against the state. They told us we were not allowed to protest, and we protested. And that's why they came down so hard on us. And on last Remembrance Day, they came down hard on the not the Remembrance Day, the St George's Day commemorations. They came down hard on those people because those people represented the great bulk of the country, and those people were challenging the state. But it was also understood by the state that many, many, many millions of people agreed with them, and they couldn't have many, many, many millions of people challenging the state. They can have thousands, even tens of thousands, but they can't have millions of people challenging the state. And so much of this is a bluff. The reason that they don't, the reason that they can't have too many people challenging the state is because, and I've said this dozens of times before, is they only have 130,000 police officers in the whole country. Now, 130,000 police officers in a high trust society is sufficient. It is nowhere near sufficient in a low trust society, such as the one we're heading for, and quite a long way down. So to me, and probably for most of you, we understand that the state is just desperate to defend itself from threats. The state is not there to protect the public. The state there is to protect itself. And a perfect example of that is my particular hobby horse, surveillance. Surveillance is not to keep us safe. It's not to catch criminals. It's to catch us. It's to keep us under control. That's why they like mass surveillance so much, because it can keep so many of us under surveillance so much of the time. So this was shocking, this revelation, but it wasn't at all surprising. What was shocking is that it appears that they knew almost from the beginning that this was a radicalized Muslim convert who decided to murder 3 children because. Um, and it's not surprising that people jump to those conclusions. It's not surprising. Now, even if it wasn't anything to do with Islamic terrorism, it still wouldn't have been. It still wouldn't have been surprising that people jump to those conclusions, considering previous attacks. And and it turns out that this was just another one of those. Once again, I'm not really sure where I'm going with this. I felt I ought to react in some way, and I was, I'm shocked and I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked that this is that these details have come out, but I am shocked that they could lie to us so brazenly, fully in the knowledge that when the information came out, they will have been. It will be obvious to us that they were lied to us, and they lied to us from the beginning, and that they'd seem not to care that that would happen, and it obviously was going to happen. I mean, it rather begs the question, doesn't it, that considering this is so damaging to them, to the government, to the establishment, to the deep state, it seems surprising they just didn't cover it up completely. I'm sure they're capable of covering it up completely. But maybe they're not as capable as all that. Maybe because we live in such a febrile internet age where things cannot be hidden very easily. Maybe this is why seems to be coming to a head, because all of those things that they used to lie about with impunity, they can now no longer lie about, or they can't. They can no longer lie about it without us finding out. What's so shocking is that they seem to be able to. They seem to be quite prepared to lie to us so openly, with no consideration, no fear that their lies will be revealed. They know they're lying. They know that we know that they're lying, and yet they don't care because they assume that there's nothing we can do about it. As with all of these things, you do wonder if there is a sort of 4D chess being played somewhere, and there are certain things that I'm not allowing for. I mean, is everything random or is everything planned? Is this planned? Do they provoke us on purpose, knowing that we can't do anything? Or do they provoke us on purpose, knowing that eventually we will do something and then they can crack down? Who knows? This is almost impossible to work this stuff out. My feeling that there are people pulling the levers properly a small number of people pulling the levers in the shadows who know exactly what they're doing. But there's huge layers of management in between, from the Prime Minister downwards, who are not pulling the levers and actually don't know what they're doing, and are just guessing or just being cajoled and pushed and pressured into doing the illogical and outrageous things that they do, like lie about why some random person decides to kill 3 children in a Taylor Swift concert, Taylor Swift dance class, whatever it was, knowing that they will be found out mere months later. So I think the great majority of these people are morons. And considering the outcome of so many things, you have to kind of assume that there are some dastardly hands behind everything. I mean, one way or another, the pressure is building. And this is likely to be the outcome of this is likely to be very ugly indeed. And this brings me to what happened on the demonstration on Saturday. I mean, I didn't want to go to the demonstration on Saturday. My heart wasn't in it. I didn't feel like I wanted to go. I ended up going on my own anyway. And like I say, my heart wasn't really in it, but I felt I had to go, and I did go. And when I got there at Victoria, there was a massive amount of people there. That's true, and of course my mood lightened somewhat then. And then as we started moving towards Parliament Square from Victoria Station, now that's a big, long, wide road, and that whole road was jammed with people all the way down it. There were a lot of people there. And then, I finally made my way into Trafalgar Square and Whitehall, where they had the screen set up. And I stayed for the film, and it was a good film, and it just rehashed all the injustices that we all know about what happened with all the protesters and the disturbances in the summer. So none of it was a real surprise to me, but it was worth going to see. And of course, Tommy wasn't there himself, obviously, because he was in custody, obviously, and so it was left to his lieutenants to sort of carry the day, and they made a fair fist of it, but the sound wasn't brilliant, and they had a guy up there playing the guitar, and the mics weren't working, and so it wasn't brilliant, but it was a good effort, and although, but it was a good turnout, at least initially. It thinned out quite a lot relatively early, and I stayed for the film, and then I thought, well, I don't want to stay any longer. Like I say, my heart wasn't in it, but I felt I had to go, and so I left sometime after the film had finished, and I was walking back, and they block all the side roads off, as you probably know, so you have to go back into Parliament Square and take a long way, the trip long way back round, because I wanted to get to Charing Cross Station. And as so I was coming, and I walked around back, and you end up walking down Horse Guards Parade. And I had my flag with me, and I was just thinking, well, at least I came. And as I was walking along Horse Guards Parade, this woman came up to me, and she was an older woman, a black woman. And she said, "Excuse me, do you know where the British Patriots rally is?" Because she said, because the police had just given me a runaround, and so I started explaining to her which way to go and how to get back to it. And I said, look, as you've come up here for this good reason, I'll just come with me, and I'll take you back round. And I took her back round because it was a bit convoluted, and then we started talking about stuff, and it turned out that she's been a supporter of Tommy Robinson for some time, and her name was Margaret, and she was from Grenada, but has been here for donkey's years, And she was telling me about when her kids found out that she was a supporter of Tommy Robinson, and they said, you can't be supportive of Tommy Robinson, Mum. That racist Tommy Robinson. And she said to them, look, he's not racist, and if you think he is racist, go and see if you can find anything that he said that is racist. And as she told me, she said off they went to go and find something, and they couldn't find anything, And then she said that they even agree with her now. So, and I thought that was quite heartwarming, really, and the reason I thought it was heartwarming is because one of the fears that I have about this whole thing is that the lack of nuance about this whole thing, and the migration, and the splintering of our society between the so-called racist whites and the woke everybody else. We know this is bullshit, but this is how it is. And I have noticed that there are people whose attitudes have hardened over time, and people who are quite liberal, in a sort of positive sense of the word, have actually become quite hardliners about things like immigration, and also about things like race. And you get these people who now say things like, "Well, you can't be black and be British." Now, I understand why some people say that, and it's not something that I really want to. It's not an attitude I really want to entertain, but I can understand why people take it because all the race grifters you get on the television, the Kahindi Andrews and the Jasmine Alibi Browns and um, the Dr. Sholers, these horrible, hateful race vultures who come on and just cause division and try to split people up. All these people, these are the examples of um, these are the negative examples of black people in the UK just doing nothing but causing trouble. And of course, people don't have, people who are quite sanguine about different races and different people being here and not worrying about it too much have now started to think, well, this is what all these black people think of us. This is what they think of us, and they're all like that, and they all think like that about us. And so it's not surprising they started to retreat into this sort of supposed racial purity. I mean, that guy Steve Laws, who's done an awful lot of good work in reporting about the illegal boats coming over. I mean, he's like that now. I mean, I don't know if he's always been like that, but he's quite uncompromising about that and just says, well, you can't be black and British. And this is something I haven't wanted to believe is true, and I still don't believe it's true, but you can see why people would think that. And the thing is that I noticed that this is where my fear of what's going to happen is coming through. And I notice even in my own local town, there's a lot more black people, and probably those black people are not people who sort of moved down from London or anything. They might be, but probably not. Probably not. They're relatively new arrivals, and most of them probably are legal immigrants rather than illegal ones. Um, but you can just imagine somebody. I just saw somebody yesterday, and she was walking down the street, with the shopping bags and doing boring English things like going shopping on a paved road in a supermarket with electricity. And she's probably thinking, wherever she comes from, she probably, well, I've made it to England now, and it is pretty good, and and we live a nice life now, and these English people don't seem to mind us being here too much, and everything's all fine. And she, probably in her head is sort of skipping along, thinking everything's fine. But the way things are going, it's not going to be fine for very much longer. And when all nuance is lost, people are going to not think about it. But I'm just assuming this person. I don't know, obviously, but I'm assuming this person is somebody who's obeying the law and paying her taxes and and all that kind of stuff, and trying to be a good citizen and trying to not fuck anybody else over and not trying to divide people and cause trouble. Um, but the very fact of her being black is going to, as attitudes harden, people like her are going to be the victims in this because people are not going to have time to or the inclination to make distinctions between who's a good immigrant and who's a bad one. And these people are going to be shocked because they're at one One minute they thought everything's fine, and I'm sort of quite accepted here, and so long as I play by the rules and don't cause any trouble, I can have a nice life here. But this stuff is bubbling under the surface now, and this situation with the murderer of the girls in Southport is just another example of why people will say, because this guy who killed the girls, he was born in Wales, and yet somehow he thought that it was a good thing for him to, for some ridiculous reason, a ridiculous and extreme reason, he thought it would be a very good idea to kill three girls. And people will say, well, look, he may be born in Wales, but he was black, born to Rwandan parents, um, and it just shows you can't trust them, can you? Can't trust them, and this is the way it will go. And so, do we think that this is the result of stupidly naive and incompetent people in the civil service, not knowing what they're doing, and playing with fire and thinking they know what they're doing, and they absolutely don't know what they're doing? Or is it deliberate? Is it deliberate? Do they just want strife? This is so bewildering, this stuff, isn't it? Because you can't. There's no solid ground to stand on here. Everything you think you know maybe just be a manipulation of something else, and you're just being manipulated to elicit a certain reaction. And that we are being provoked deliberately in order for us to react in a certain way. And I talked last time about how we mustn't lose our tempers. Um, but it's difficult not to lose your temper under such provocation. But nothing good ever comes from losing your temper. And I say that as someone who has a short temper, you know, um, and at the very least, you can humiliate yourself with a short temper. And I speak from experience. And it's also not the other thing that's shocking about this as well, um, is that this piece of information has come out on Tuesday, and we had a massive demonstration on Saturday. Did they not know until yesterday, until Monday? Or did they know on Saturday? Or did they know on Friday? Or did they know a month ago? Or 3 months ago? The timing is suspect at the very least. Um, we've got the budget tomorrow or the day after, haven't we? And letting this little nugget out at this moment kind of suggests that the budget is going to be absolutely terrible. I mean, it's already, as time goes on, more and more things, um, more and more things that I'm going to be made to live under are the things that I've mostly wanted not to live under. The trampling of free speech, um, the constant surveillance, and now particularly what seems as if it really is coming. One of the things that I've feared the most is pay per mile. And I have noticed, um, I notice every automatic number plate recognition camera that goes up. Just in my local town, there's probably just my local town is like, and surrounding villages. Mm, well, just in the two towns that are close together, I know of at least a dozen ANPR cameras, and it might even be more than that, actually. But these are relatively new. They've all come out since COVID. They've all been installed since COVID. Which is significant in itself, perhaps. But the thing is as always, is what are we to do about it? We have to try to sort of break through this barrier that most people have, that it isn't happening. The totalitarian state is not being constructed. If you were to ask them. Now, there are people out there who are completely ignorant about what's going on. They've got no idea at all. There are those people. Then there are people who um, believe that there is, um, an expanding surveillance state, but it's a good thing because we've got to catch the bad guys. So there's those people. And then there's the sort of key demographic of people who know there's something horrible is happening. They might not know the details, but there were certain things that were going on, um, like the lack of law and order and the increased surveillance. And the more surveillance increases, the more violent society gets. And they kind of know, but they don't want to admit it to themselves. And this is the big demographic we've got to reach. These are the people, because the people who are completely ignorant, there will be always completely ignorant, no matter what. Then there are the sort of what I would call the sort of the pseudo-fascists, the people that know it's going on but quite like it because they like the idea of a totalitarian state, so long as it goes after other people and not them. And then there's the sort of kind of soft Democrats. Now, I mean Democrat in a generalized term, not in the American political party Democrats, but people who sort of kind of quite like the idea of that we live in a free country. But they're not very principled about it, and if it's all too much to try and support it, they won't support it. But these are people that there will be a nagging doubt at the back of their mind, thinking, is this okay? What's going on? Is it okay for people to be locked up for 2.5 years for something they said on Facebook? You know, they wouldn't go so far as saying something that would get them locked up on Facebook, but they probably think, you know, at the back of their mind, they probably think, I didn't like what he said, and I wouldn't say it, but flipping hell, that's locking someone up for 2.5 years for something they said on Facebook. That sounds like that's not a very good track to go down. And I think those are the people that we have to reach. We have to make people understand that totalitarianism isn't just something that happens in history and just happens to other people. And it's just something that happened that we can now look back on with a certain amount of smugness that it didn't happen to us. You know, the Soviet Union, the Nazis, you know, the Stasi in East Germany, any number of tin pot third world countries where this sort of stuff happens. They just don't ever believe it will happen here. But I think that is changing, and I think that people are beginning to notice things that they didn't notice before or wouldn't admit to noticing. The demonstration I went to in July, all the way back then, I met these people. I met a couple, and they had this flag, and I couldn't quite see what it was. It was dancing around, and it was like a Union flag, but it had some green on it. And I was thinking, oh, what's that? And I said to them, what's on your flag? Before waiting a few seconds, then I could see what it was, because basically what it was a Union flag, but with the Welsh dragon on it as well, because Wales is not represented on the Union flag, and you might think it ought to be, but it isn't. So if you want to represent Wales in the Union flag, you've got to play around with the flag. And these people that I spoke to, this couple, they were very sort of well-to-do couple. I mean, I can't say that they sounded particularly Welsh, but maybe they were, maybe posh Welsh, can't tell so much. But they were a pretty well-to-do couple. And those are the sort of people that maybe only 2 years ago wouldn't have been seen dead at a Tommy Robinson demo. So there is a change happening, I think. I saw another woman interviewed, just a video of a woman. She was, very sort of kind of a bit mousy, not very strident in her views, but she was obviously of that demographic that thought this sort of thing was never going to befall us. And now she's thinking again and think maybe there is a real danger here. But this is an issue. how to get people to realise, and also how to get people to be brave enough even to notice it themselves, to allow themselves to notice. Because I think that's what is the issue with quite a lot of people, is that they're kind of disengaged politically in the way that we aren't, um, and they but at the same time they have this kind of cozy idea that we live in a free country, we live in a democracy, and this sort of thing will never happen here. And and they are basically putting their heads in the sand. And these are the sort of people the government are relying on to say, "Oh, look, don't worry about it. It's not as bad as that. Oh, it's only a few. It's only a few Tommy Robinson supporters who got locked up, and and but these are the people the government are relying on to do nothing, and not to speak out, because speaking out makes you conspicuous, and it makes you. There's also this thing. It makes you seem as if, for someone like me, of my age, it seems like, what's this bloke? He's in his 50s. He's in his mid 50s, and he's still talking like he's a student revolutionary. And that's enough to keep people from saying anything. And I feel self-conscious about it as well. I just like, I don't really want to be thought of as being too earnest about this. And like politics is a game. It's a dinner party conversation, but it isn't. And Peter Lynch could tell you that. God rest his soul, if he was still here. And countless others who've been imprisoned. They've been in prison. Basically, let's try and get this straight here. They've been in prison for expressing their opinions. The libtards will say, well, oh, it's hate speech. It's like inciting racial hatred. I mean, they're so broad that, because almost any criticism you might have of anybody at any time could be framed as being inciting racial hatred or inciting violence. That's what's so dangerous about the way that people frame law. And they do it in so many ways. If you read any of this legislation, and I admit I don't read much of it, but when I have read some of it, so much of it is it's framed in a you know it, in a way that sort of suggests that, well, basically it's anybody who wants to make you guilty of something can massage the thing that you said into something else. A reasonable person is often what they say, such that a reasonable person would believe this might incite hatred or incite violence. So there isn't any, the way that the laws are framed, there isn't any principle. There's no principle to say you can do that, but not that. It's basically, you can't do that. And if you do that, we might just interpret it that you've done that. But I suppose the good thing about this, and I know that I'm searching for silver lining in a mushroom cloud here. Um, we do seem to be getting to a breaking point here. And we can't go on like this. I mean, I probably felt this about the last government, but really, this government really does take the biscuit. It's the worst one I've ever known in my entire life. The corruption is the very least of it. The freebies and backhanders um, and um, the formulating of energy policy to benefit some of the Labour Party's biggest donors, rather than for the national interest. I mean, you know, um, and all the corruption that comes within, with that. I mean, that's the least of it. One of the strange things about um, when they announced the remove of the winter fuel payments for the pensioners, quite a lot of lefties were quite pissed off about that, and for good reason. Um, some of the more principled ones were, but quite a lot of the people lefties who were pissed off with the Labour government were pissed off because of all the freebies and the corruption and the backhanders and all the suits and the free spectacles and the stays at apartments in New York City and all that sort of stuff. Um, and the reason they seemed to be pissed off about it was not because they weren't they're not at all pissed off by the fact that the Labour government has just steamrolled over free speech. That's not what's got them upset. What's got them upset is that this Labour government is just behaving like a load of corrupt Tories. That's what's really upset them. You know, um, but the most important things that they're doing, the most importantly bad things like steamrolling your freedom of speech and jailing people for Facebook posts, um, they're not particularly concerned about that. They're just concerned that well, Labour politicians actually turn out to be just like Tory politicians, just as corrupt. You know, in the old BBC comedy Yes Prime Minister, they had a scene where the um, I think it was when Jim Hacker was being touted for the top job, and his you know um, his competitors, because he wasn't he the 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 personage of Jim Hacker wasn't a Tory prime minister or a Labour one. He was an amalgam, so it was like all politicians are the same, and so they had sort of left wing and right wing competitors to the top job. And they said, well, the thing is that what we always find out is that all the Tory ones get tripped up because of their sexual misadventures, and all the Labour ones get tripped up because of their financial corruption. So it was quite true in that. It was quite well observed. But there is no real difference between them, as we all know. So, But we must brace ourselves for this budget, because it does sound as if it's going to be horrific. I've tried not to listen to too many of the rumours, but the thing that upsets me more than anything else is this idea of the paper mile, because as with you, Les, the charge is outrageous, but the surveillance is worse, because that is what it's all about. It's all about surveillance and control. And once they've got control, then they can just charge you for money. And they're talking about taking money straight out of your bank account if they think you're a benefit fraud and all the rest of it. And of course, there will be the pseudo fascists who think that's a good thing, because somebody's ripping off the taxpayer, you know. But I don't know. It's how much more are we gonna put up with here? It's an exercise in endurance and humiliation, which is not it's not ideal, is it? It's a curious thing having to watch what you say. It's never been a thing in my life to have to watch what you say, have to watch your opinions, and now it is. In the land of Magna Carta. Well, anyway, look, we um, again another you know directionless ramble. Um, but things are coming so thick and fast. You have to try and react to some things um, in order to try and make sense of things in a senseless, bewildering world that we have now. I mean, that was the other thing, isn't it? They managed to wait till they got Tommy locked up before releasing this information. There's more. You know, they're just dastardly. These people, they're just dastardly. But they will overreach themselves, and they're doing that now. Um, and we shall see what happens, won't we? And then we'll also see how things change with what happens in America next week. Yeah. So anyway, take care, everybody, and stay free.